Part 3. The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 23. The four ghosts created by Yuan Meng and his four companions also underwent earth-shaking changes when the real rules from the White Ghost were integrated into the prehistoric world. The original height of billions of miles began to shrink rapidly, and in just 2 breaths, it had shrunk to the height of a normal person's body. Then Yuan Meng flicked his sleeves and sent all 3 ghosts in front of him into the prehistoric underworld. Although these 4 ghosts were created by Yuan Meng and his companions in imitation of the White Ghost in the real world, they are almost exactly the same in every aspect. But in essence, they are actually different, and can even be said to be worlds apart. Therefore, after Yuan Meng changed the rules of the prehistoric world and made the prehistoric world evolve a little, these 4 ghosts followed suit and became the size of normal people. If the White Ghost was still there, even if Yuan Meng changed the rules of the prehistoric world and made the prehistoric world evolve to a certain extent, it would be difficult to have much effect on the White Ghost. At most, it would change from a height of billions of miles to a height of hundreds of billions of miles. Of course, when Yuan Meng integrated the rules into the prehistoric world, the changes in the prehistoric underworld were a little bigger. As for the heaven and the human world, this kind of thing will not happen. The rules that form ghosts will naturally be integrated into the heaven and the human world. However, the rules with yin attributes will not be completely integrated into the heaven and the human world, but will be selectively integrated to maintain the balance of yin and yang. In the heaven, the yin attribute rules that are integrated are even weaker. As for not integrating them into the heaven at all, that is impossible. The heaven is where the heavenly venerable lives. As the residents of the main heaven and earth, how can it abandon the yin attribute rules? Since the matter has been perfectly resolved, Yuan Meng is ready to leave the prehistoric world and return to the real world. But, after the White Ghost was completely strangled, a little bright light appeared. This little light is very small, otherwise the Hades Emperor would not have been able to find him before. You must know that even any object in the real world will become huge in the prehistoric world. But even in the prehistoric world, this little spiritual light is even much smaller than the most basic energy particles in the prehistoric world, which shows how tiny this little spiritual light is. If this is not clear enough, then a specific comparison will show it. In Yuan Meng's prehistoric world, there are actually basic material structures similar to atoms, molecules, protons, electrons, and quark nanostructures. After all, when Yuan Meng was studying various scientific books in the real world, some of his cognition of the real world and the world would naturally be borrowed by him and evolved in the prehistoric world. In the prehistoric world, even the most basic material unit quark is also formed by the fusion of countless energy particles. Yes, that's right, the prehistoric world is different from the real material world. Everything in the prehistoric world is an energy world composed of energy. Before this, Yuan Meng didn't think much of it, but when the dust in the real world was collected by him into the prehistoric world, it directly evolved into an infinite star measured in light years. He realized the gap between the prehistoric world and the real world. Perhaps the most basic units of matter in the real world, such as quarks and atoms, will turn into stars that are larger than the prehistoric sun after entering the prehistoric world. From this, we can imagine how small the most basic energy particles in the prehistoric world are. And as it is countless times smaller than the most basic energy particles in the prehistoric world, we can imagine how tiny that little spiritual light is. However, despite this, in the prehistoric world that was developed by Yuan Meng's spiritual space through repeated evolution, especially in the prehistoric underworld that was completely controlled and dominated by Yuan Meng's incarnation of the Hades still felt the appearance of this little spiritual light. And the moment this little spiritual light appeared, it seemed to have its own spiritual wisdom, flickering and appearing, as if it wanted to break through the space of the prehistoric underworld and escape from the prehistoric world, perhaps wanting to return to the real world. As the lord of the underworld, the underworld emperor would naturally be aware of the movement of this little spiritual light, so he couldn't help but let out a sigh. Seeing that this little spiritual light was about to break through the barrier of the underworld, even the world barrier of Yuan Meng's chaotic world, and escape into the real world. The underworld emperor instinctively stretched out his palm and gently closed his 5 fingers. Not only his own power, but also the power of the underworld was mobilized by him at this moment. The surrounding time and space condensed, and condensed again at this moment. At this moment, no matter how small the spiritual light was, it could not find the slightest gap to escape and was completely solidified in place. The appearance of this little spiritual light naturally aroused the interest of Yuan Meng and his 3 incarnations. Yuan Meng also temporarily gave up the plan to leave the underworld and return to the real world. Instead, together with his 3 incarnations, he enveloped his mind towards the spiritual light. He carefully analyzed and studied it, trying to find out its composition and structural components. Several days passed, and the prehistoric world had no idea how many billions of years had passed, but Yuan Meng had not made much progress in his research on that little spiritual light. He only knew that it was very similar to the energy particles in the prehistoric world in structure, but it was countless times smaller and tougher than the energy particles in the prehistoric world. Yuan Meng and his team had tried countless times to split the energy particles in the prehistoric world again to see if they could form something as big as that little spiritual light. It was just a pity that when Yuan Meng split the energy particles, even though he had absolute control over the prehistoric world, the energy particles still completely collapsed and annihilated. Since this road was blocked, they thought about whether they could conduct a deeper study on that little spiritual light. As Yuan Meng and his team continued their research, they were surprised to find that the little spiritual light was extremely small. But in terms of its relative strength, the power of this little spiritual light was actually very strong. Before, when that little spiritual light wanted to escape, it had actually been reflected. After all, at that time, the Hades not only used his own power, but also mobilized the power of the primitive underworld to trap it. This is not only because the spiritual light is very small and difficult to trap, but also because its own power cannot be ignored. The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 24. When analyzing that little spiritual light, Yuan Meng and his team found that it was not only powerful, but also had an amazing toughness. No matter what means Yuan Meng and his team used, they could not cause any damage to it, as if it was the most basic and solid thing in the world, which could not be divided again and could not be destroyed. In the end, Yuan Meng even mobilized the power of the chaotic world. Although it was only a part of the power of the chaotic world, the power contained in it was still unimaginable. But even such a huge force did not cause any damage to that little spiritual light. This surprised Yuan Meng. He did not understand what kind of existence this little spiritual light was. When Yuan Meng had used all his means, he still could not figure it out, and he could not even completely destroy it. He even had the idea of sending it out of the prehistoric world. But after hesitating for a long time, Yuan Meng finally gave up the idea. Because this little spiritual light is not only indestructible, but also seems to have instinctive intelligence. It will instinctively hide, or even find a way to escape from the prehistoric underworld. This is why Yuan Meng has concerns and gives up the idea. Who knows if there is a behind-the-scenes existence behind this little spiritual light? Does it have the function of recording? Transmit the situation of his own chaotic world? If this is true, with the means of that behind-the-scenes existence to create this almost immortal spiritual light, if someone has bad thoughts about him, I am afraid that just a thought can make him doomed. Even if he has the prehistoric world and the so-called infinite chaotic space, I am afraid he can't make a wave. Therefore, Yuan Meng decided to temporarily suppress that little spiritual light in the depths of time and space in the prehistoric underworld. During the time when Yuan Meng studied that little spiritual light, He also found that the real world was not just that simple white ghost, but his real body had also undergone earth-shaking changes. The body, which had already reached its peak and was extremely difficult to strengthen even a little bit, was like breaking some kind of shackles, or some kind of shackles in the real world, which were broken and untied. Yuan Meng's body began a new round of strengthening. In just a few days, it had more than doubled again. Moreover, the various energies in Yuan Meng's body also had the ability to interfere with reality and began to take effect in the real world. For example, the hot and masculine blood power in Yuan Meng's body would burst out from his body whenever he used all his strength. His whole body was covered in a layer of red light, and the hot breath even caused the surrounding air to distort slightly. There was even a little red spirit smoke, which gathered above Yuan Meng's head and swayed slightly, adding a bit of power to him. Of course, it was not only when he used all his strength that the blood power would burst out from his body, but Yuan Meng himself could also actively stimulate it. The star force flowing in the meridians and acupoints in Yuan Meng's body can also be mobilized by him. When the star force condenses in the real world, it is like a force condensed by starlight. When it sways slightly, the starlight is like Yuan Meng holding a galaxy in his hand. And not only that, when Yuan Meng uses the star force, he can even slightly attract the star force in the real world and the endless void. Although he doesn't understand why there is so-called star force in the real world of pure material, and even on the moon, there is really so-called Taiyan moonlight falling. Isn't the moon reflecting sunlight? However, Yuan Meng can do this now. As for the fact that there is star force in the real world, Yuan Meng has already thought of a lot in a moment. There are ghosts in the real world. Maybe the so-called materialistic real world is not so materialistic, maybe, probably, and maybe there are still some spiritual and fantasy. Of course, Yuan Meng, apart from the power of the sun, can only slightly activate other powers such as the moonlight and the stars at night. As for the daytime, even though Yuan Meng knew that the stars in the sky were still in their original positions, he could only sense them faintly, but could not really activate these powers. As for the chaotic elemental force in Yuan Meng's body, it can naturally be guided out of his body, and the characteristics of the chaotic elemental force are just like its name, chaos. The characteristic of the chaotic elemental force is chaos, which is the beginning of all things and the source of all laws. It is also the destination of all things and the end of the world. The chaotic elemental force can evolve and enhance any kind of power, and of course, any power can be transformed into the chaotic elemental force. However, the power that the chaotic elemental force can evolve also requires Yuan Meng to thoroughly analyze it. Otherwise, if he only has a little contact with it or just hears about its characteristics, he can only simulate it to a certain extent based on his imagination. At present, in addition to the various powers that Yuan Meng himself possessed, he could only truly evolve the power of Yin Qi that was analyzed from the white ghost. As for the other powers of the ghost, in fact, except for the rule diagram and the Yin Qi it carried, the rest was just a group of scattered mental power. In addition to these powers, Yuan Meng's body actually contains some other powers. That is the power of different attributes nurtured by the 5 internal organs in Yuan Meng's body. These powers are not weaker than the other qi and blood forces in Yuan Meng's body. And the fact that this power can be manifested should be related to Yuan Meng's continuous strengthening of his body with the chaos force. After all, the chaos force can evolve any power. When strengthening the body, it will naturally strengthen the power of that attribute according to the different attributes of the body and some thoughts in Yuan Meng's mind, and finally evolve various different power attributes. For example, the star force that circulates in the meridians, or the blood force that permeates the body, may not have evolved in this way. After all, at the beginning, only the chaotic force was born in Yuan Meng's body. As for the previous Taishu and Taishi forces, they can actually be regarded as incomplete chaotic force. In other words, the first force born in Yuan Meng's body was the chaotic force. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 25. Chapter 25 5 Internal Organs and 5 Elements. The 5 internal organs belong to the 5 elements of gold, water, wood, fire, and earth, at least in Yuan Meng's cognition. Then the chaotic Yuan Li in his Danshan will naturally evolve into different attribute powers according to his cognition. The lungs belong to gold, and the evolution of the power of the gold element can mobilize the power of the 5 elements of gold, which is sharp and unstoppable. On the inside, it can increase the strength of the lungs and enhance the hardness and firmness of the whole body. The kidneys belong to water, and the evolution of the power of the water element can mobilize the power of the 5 elements of water. Softness nourishes all things and nourishes the body and mind. It is the source of life. Hardness is unstoppable and destroys everything. The liver belongs to wood, and the evolution of the power of the wood element can mobilize the power of the 5 elements of wood. It is a symbol of life. The enhancement of the power of the wood attribute can greatly enhance a person's vitality, and even the regeneration of broken limbs is not impossible. Of course, life and death are relative. If a person's vitality is too strong and there is not enough control ability, it may also cause the withering of life. For example, cancer cells are evolved from normal cells of the human body and are considered a part of the human body. Therefore, cancer is so difficult to cure because it is originally a part of the human body. Ordinary cells have a certain number of divisions and a specific life limit. How strong is the vitality of cancer cells? If the environment is suitable, cancer cells can even divide and reproduce indefinitely to survive, so we can imagine how strong its vitality is. Moreover, cancer cells are essentially the cells of the human body and are a part of the human body. Theoretically, if a person can control his own cancer cells, so that it no longer grows irregularly and infinitely, and regains various abilities, then all normal cells of the body are transformed into various types of cancer cells. What will happen to this person in the end? Can he achieve a kind of longevity in the conventional sense? Or even immortality? Of course, no one can control cancer cells, so no one can know what will happen if a person can hold on until all normal cells in the body have become cancerous and have not died. So after getting cancer, although cancer cells are part of the body and the vitality is extremely strong, because it cannot be controlled and restrained, it is inevitable to die in the end. The heart belongs to fire, evolving the power of fire, controlling the power of the 5 elements of fire, burning the sky and boiling the sea, burning all things, but there is also the saying of the fire of life and nirvana rebirth. The spleen belongs to earth, evolving the power of earth, controlling the power of the 5 elements of earth, being virtuous and carrying things, carrying infinite, but it can also suppress the universe and destroy all laws. Sensing the power of the 5 elements contained in the body, Yuan Meng stretched out his hand slightly, and a golden light suddenly appeared, with a sharp aura, burning people's eyes. And with his mind, the sense gathered the power of the gold element between heaven and earth, about half an hour of work. In Yuan Meng's hand, there was a golden ball of gold power, which turned into a short sword under his control. It would be more accurate to say it was a dagger. Looking at the golden dagger in front of him, which looked more like a work of art than a weapon, Yuan Meng felt that the dagger was extremely sharp and seemed to be able to cut through everything in the world, but he was still a little uncertain and gently cut towards the armrest of the recliner on the right. Without any sound, and without even feeling much resistance, the dagger in Yuan Meng's hand had already cut through the armrest of the recliner. With a snap, a piece of the armrest fell gently to the ground. This surprised Yuan Meng. Although he thought that the dagger in his hand, which was condensed with the power of the gold element, should be very sharp and could cut off the armrest in front of him. But Yuan Meng never expected that it was so sharp. He originally thought that if he wanted to cut off the armrest, he should still need to use some strength. He would be satisfied even if he could cut off half of the armrest. Looking at the armrest that fell on the ground, and then raising the dagger in his hand to look at it carefully, Yuan Meng's mouth couldn't help but slightly grin. The dagger transformed by the power of the metal element really satisfied Yuan Meng, but soon, Yuan Meng frowned again and dispersed the dagger in his hand. This gold-attributed power is indeed very sharp, but there is not too much of it in the world. It should be said that it is too rare. Yuan Meng spent half a quarter of an hour to condense the gold-attributed power that can be transformed into a dagger, which is not suitable for fighting in emergency situations. Next, Yuan Meng mobilized several other 5 elements and tested them one by one. Then he found that although the power of the other 5 elements can mobilize much more power, if it is really used in battle, there are also various disadvantages. For example, the power of water, perhaps because there is a small artificial lake in front of him, Yuan Meng is indeed much more relaxed to mobilize it. It is very easy to form a large group of water power, which is transformed into a water dragon by him, circling around him slowly, looking extremely powerful and cool. But it is indeed just an appearance. If you really want to use it to attack, it will only have the impact force of the water dragon itself, which is not even as good as an ordinary high-pressure water gun. In fact, it is the same as the power of a ball of water, just in a different form. As for the power of the wood element, there is no need to say more, because it is backed by mountains and thriving vegetation, so it is naturally not lacking. But if you want to use it to fight, you will naturally have the intention but not the power. For example, in the novel, you can't even think about controlling the trees and vines to attack the enemy. Anyway, with Yuan Meng's current state, it is impossible to do it. He has also tried to use the power of wood to control trees and vines, and it does have some effects. When Yuan Meng integrated the power of a piece of wood into a sickly grass, the grass turned green at an extremely fast speed, and even grew 1 centimeter taller at a speed visible to the naked eye. Height. Well, that's it. It has grown 1 centimeter in height. Although this is already amazing, Yuan Meng has never heard of anyone whose grass can grow 1 centimeter in just 2 breaths. Moreover, Yuan Meng can also slightly control the direction of its growth. But you want to fight with it, isn't that funny? Could it be that the enemy is shocked by the growth speed of the grass and is frightened to death? Among the 5 elements, the power of fire is the most powerful. Yuan Meng mobilized the power of fire to condense a fist-sized fireball in a very short time. After all, there is still a huge fireball hanging in the sky. The power of fire between heaven and earth is abundant. And the power of the fireball is not small. Although it is not as good as the current bombs, it is already very different from those old-fashioned grenades. Not to mention, Yuan Meng can also extend the time to condense the fireball, condense a larger fireball, and explode with greater power. Well, it's the end of the month, so I would like to thank all the book friends for their great support. And book friends. Taoist Qian 20204051351355333160. It's you who stretches as far as the eye can see. I haven't thought of a name yet, think about it later. Songs of long separation. Even if you drink wine in vain, it is nothing but a reward from a lovesick person. So the author decided to add another chapter. Well, with all the support from all the book friends, I would be really sorry if there are no more updates. Well, although the first update is a bit short, it is still coded by the young author. Guys, please forgive me, hee. It will probably be sent out in the afternoon. The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 26. However, the power of the fire element also has a fatal flaw, that is, it can only quickly condense the power of the fire element during the day. After all, there is the sun in the sky, which is the strongest source of the power of the fire element. But it is not possible at night. There is no sun at night, and it is extremely difficult to condense enough power of the fire element. If we say that the least restricted thing now is the power of the earth element among the 5 elements. Because no matter where you are, there will be the existence of the earth. Even on the sea, it is also carried by the earth, but it is a little far away from the land under the sea, and it is difficult to be sensed and mobilized. But Yuan Meng is not on the sea, but on the earth. The nearly endless, heavy, and vast power of the earth can be easily sensed by him. It's just that although Yuan Meng can mobilize the same source of power in the outside world through the energy in his body, with his body size, even if he uses all his strength, how much power between heaven and earth can he mobilize? As for using a little power, through resonance, to mobilize more power of heaven and earth, so as to achieve the effect of 4 ounces to move 1,000 pounds. Yuan Meng said that he thought too much. Although he didn't know how others were, he could only mobilize the power of heaven and earth with the same power in his body. In other words, if Yuan Meng used one part of his power, he could mobilize one part of the power of heaven and earth. That is to say, when Yuan Meng mobilized the power of heaven and earth from the outside world, he could only increase his own power by 1 time. In this case, if Yuan Meng wanted to improve his own power, he needed to increase the energy in his body, analyze more rules of heaven and earth, and continue to improve the prehistoric world. However, it is not so easy to analyze the rules of heaven and earth and improve the prehistoric world. Don't think that analyzing the rules is very easy just because Yuan Meng analyzed the rules contained in the white ghost easily before. That's because the white ghost was just born, and the rules contained in its body were not only superficial, but also simple and scattered, which was very obvious. In addition, he took the white ghost into the prehistoric world, and it would be much easier to analyze it with the power of the whole prehistoric world. As for other power systems, it is difficult to analyze them because the system level of the prehistoric world is too low. Therefore, the prehistoric world basically evolved some similar energies based on Yuan Meng's cognition, imagination, and the various different attributes of energy in his body. For example, the sun, moon, stars, earth, mountains, and rivers in the prehistoric world evolved in this way. It has been said before that Yuan Meng's prehistoric world is not a material world, but a pure energy world. Everything in the world is just an aggregate of energy. As for evolving real matter, Yuan Meng cannot do it for the time being, and he cannot analyze the composition and structure of matter. Otherwise, Yuan Meng would have analyzed everything in the real world to complete the prehistoric world. Now Yuan Meng can only analyze some energy rules. This is because the prehistoric world itself is an energy world, and it is relatively perfect in terms of energy rules, but other material rules are completely absent. This is also the reason why the white ghost, which looks much larger than dust, enters the prehistoric world and is only transformed into a huge one of billions of miles. However, a speck of dust in the real world has directly evolved into an infinite star, and its heavy mass can distort the prehistoric time and space, and even the chaotic space. Therefore, the prehistoric world has a natural advantage in analyzing the rules contained in energy. However, analyzing the material rules of the real world is extremely difficult. Therefore, what Yuan Meng has to do now is to find various special energies, analyze the rules contained in them, and continuously complete and perfect the prehistoric world. When the prehistoric world is perfected to a certain extent and the level of the dimension is raised to a certain level, then analyze the various material rules of the real world. However, it is not easy to find those special energies now. At least in this day, except for the ghost that was first discovered, Yuan Meng has not found other ghosts. As for analyzing the various powers that were beginning to emerge between heaven and earth, Yuan Meng was indeed doing it, but perhaps because these energies were too advanced, he was having a hard time analyzing them. Yuan Meng couldn't even completely analyze the most basic rules of these energies and form specific rules and texts. However, the existence that could be easily analyzed by Yuan Meng now, such as the white ghost, was not discovered. Therefore, Yuan Meng could only be patient and analyze the energy rules between heaven and earth bit by bit. As for increasing the energy in the body, Yuan Meng sensed with his mind that the chaotic elemental force that spread throughout every corner of the body, and the star elemental force that filled the meridians and acupoints and flowed, could not increase the energy at all. Could it be really like what was written in the novel, that now that he had reached the great perfection of Qi training, he needed to compress the elemental force in his body and then condense the golden elixir? He didn't have a ready-made method, so if he really wanted to condense the golden elixir, he could only explore it himself. Moreover, it is compressed. If you are not careful, it will make a loud boom. No, by then, I might be blown up, and where can I go to hear the sound? Yuan Meng couldn't help but think with a wry smile. It seems to be the same direction. Yuan Meng suddenly seemed to have thought of something, his eyes became brighter and brighter, he nodded thoughtfully, and muttered to himself. Yuan Meng naturally couldn't experiment arbitrarily in his own body, but it was different in the prehistoric world. No matter what went wrong at that time, it would not affect him, and the energy in the prehistoric world was endless and inexhaustible, so he could experiment arbitrarily. Moreover, how did the current chaotic space come from? That was formed by Gu Yuan's repeated compression to the limit, which caused the chaotic space to undergo qualitative changes and then transformation. So can the energy in the prehistoric world be compressed and condensed again? Even if the entire world does not collapse and condense, if the energy in the prehistoric world can be continuously compressed and condensed, and the quality level of the energy in the prehistoric world and the chaotic space can be continuously improved, then it can also drive the advancement of the entire world. Yuan Meng thought seriously that it should be possible, and he could even use the improvement of the energy of the prehistoric world to drive the improvement of the quality of various energies in his body. The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 27. Yuan Meng gathered his mind and instantly entered the prehistoric world again. Standing on the top of the prehistoric world, Yuan Meng glanced at the prehistoric world, then retracted his gaze and ignored it. At this time, the three Tianzun were naturally able to detect Yuan Meng's arrival, but they did not show up because there was no need. After all, it was just an experimental energy compression. In this regard, Yuan Meng himself was an expert in it. After all, he had performed world-class compression several times. Moreover, if it succeeded, Yuan Meng would need to write this kind of energy compression rule concept into the entire prehistoric world, including the core of the infinite chaotic space, which was not something that the three Tianzun could do. Yuan Meng gently stretched out his palm, and his 5 fingers slightly closed. The energy in the prehistoric world immediately began to gather crazily in his palm. However, in just a moment, a ball of energy emitting dazzling light was already suspended in Yuan Meng's palm. And as Yuan Meng's fingers continued to close, they continued to gather the surrounding energy, while the energy ball in his palm not only did not expand and grow, but was constantly condensed and compressed. Finally, at a certain moment, the energy ball in Yuan Meng's palm suddenly shrank and turned into an energy ball the size of a marble, emitting dazzling golden light. And even if Yuan Meng lost control, this energy marble emitting dazzling golden light, it can now be called a golden pill. Even if Yuan Meng no longer controlled it, the golden pill in his palm did not collapse, but continued to float in his palm in a stable form. It condensed in one go. Such a golden pill, Yuan Meng should be very satisfied. However, Yuan Meng frowned as he looked at the golden pill in his palm, obviously not very satisfied. If according to his original idea, Yuan Meng should have succeeded, although this was because he was in the prehistoric world, he could fully control the energy here and could easily condense the golden pill. However, Yuan Meng's control over various energies in the real world is not weak, and he should be able to condense a golden elixir. However, compared with Yuan Meng's original idea, this is nothing. He wanted to rely on the method of compressing and condensing energy to improve the quality level of the energy of the entire prehistoric world and drive the world to upgrade. In this way, Yuan Meng condensed such a golden elixir with the energy in the prehistoric world, which naturally would not satisfy him. In the following period of time, Yuan Meng continued to condense energy in various ways, but in the end, he condensed a golden elixir, which was at most more condensed and slightly higher in quality. Yuan Meng pinched his chin with his right hand, stroking it gently, staring at the golden elixir in front of him that was shining with golden light, almost covering the top of Buzhu Mountain, like a sky full of stars. And the small spaces and dimensions that were scattered around, one after another, he pondered secretly. His idea should be correct, but no matter how he condenses, a golden pill will be formed in the end. It's not that he can't continue to condense and compress. In this prehistoric world that is absolutely controlled by Yuan Meng, if he wants, he can continue to condense and compress. However, perhaps it is because the space-time rules of the prehistoric world are still relatively low-level and weak. As long as Yuan Meng compresses these golden pills to a certain extent, these golden pills will collapse and condense directly to form a small space, another space-time dimension. Yuan Meng did not improve the quality of the energy in the prehistoric world, but made the space-time rules of the prehistoric world more perfect. Well, although it is only a very weak trace, no matter what, it can be regarded as planting flowers with intention but not blooming, planting willows without intention but willows grow into shades. It's just that Yuan Meng's original purpose was not achieved, which always made him feel a little unhappy. Could he still condense all the energy of the prehistoric world into golden pills? Yuan Meng could already imagine the scene of the future life in the prehistoric world when they practiced. Oh, I wonder how many golden pills you absorbed today. Well, not many, just a dozen golden pills. The scene was too beautiful. Yuan Meng didn't dare to imagine it anymore, shook his head, and threw his unreliable imagination out of his mind. He would definitely think of other ways. Huh. It seems feasible. As if he had thought of something, Yuan Meng's right hand, which was originally pinching his chin lightly, suddenly clenched into a fist and gently hit his left hand. Yuan Meng thought of the most basic energy particles in the prehistoric world, and the little spiritual light that he suppressed and sealed. Their existence form is actually very similar to the golden pill condensed by Yuan Meng, isn't it? It's just that it has been reduced countless times. Yuan Meng only thought of using a large amount of energy for compression and condensation before, but forgot to improve the quality of the most basic energy, and condense the golden pill, although it is also a continuous compression of energy. But there is still a difference between them, that is, he condensed the golden elixir, which was to compress the energy on a macro level. And to improve the quality of the basic energy of the prehistoric world, it is more necessary to condense and compress the energy on a micro level. Thinking of this, Yuan Meng's mind moved, and he immediately entered the micro level, and saw that the air around him was full of dense, splitting, and combining energy particles. But the Buzhu Mountain under your feet is not composed of energy particles, because it is a whole, or the entire Buzhu Mountain is a huge energy particle. These energy particles are somewhat similar to the basic particles that make up matter in the real world, but they are not the same. Because Yuan Meng, after all, borrowed various scientific theoretical knowledge from the real world, so the existence form of these energy particles is somewhat similar to the basic particles that make up matter in the real world. For example, they are all presented in particles, and they also have mutual forces such as attraction and repulsion, which are very similar to atoms and electrons. However, they also have differences, that is, these energy particles, when they approach each other, can actually be completely fused together, just like two drops of compatible water, and there will be no gaps. And those that are integrated in the macroscopic world are actually a whole, and only the energy in the air is composed of energy particles. As for the mountains, rivers, lakes, and seas under your feet, they are actually the energy of the whole body, but because of Yuan Meng's different settings, they are expressed in different forms. It is not like the matter in the real world. Although many things exist as a whole at a macroscopic level, in fact, at a microscopic level, there are large gaps between these things. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 28. Chapter 28: The Birth of Spiritual Energy and the Connection of Power. When Yuan Meng thought about the little spiritual light that appeared in the body of the white ghost after it was killed and shattered, a spiritual light flashed in his heart. Because, one thing Yuan Meng can be sure of is that that bit of spiritual light is by no means a material component, but rather seems to be composed of special energy. When thinking of this, Yuan Meng was wondering, could the energy of the prehistoric world also exist in this form? Although Yuan Meng was unable to completely analyze the structure of that aura, but just imitating the structure of that aura, condensing the energy of the prehistoric world in a microscopic way by condensing the golden elixir, it may not be impossible to construct something similar to that aura. Real energy particles. Think about it. Yuan Meng concentrated on the energy particle in front of him, constantly fusing other energy particles, and imitating that aura, carefully compressing it according to specific rules. Of course, Yuan Meng is only imitating the surface. Since the core things cannot be analyzed in depth, it is definitely impossible to copy. However, this is enough. As Yuan Meng continued to fuse and compress other energy particles, finally at a certain moment, puff! A very small space was formed instantly under the gaze of Yuan Meng's spiritual thoughts. Unfortunately, this was not what he wanted. So, fail. Yuan Meng was not discouraged. He chose another energy particle and started the process of energy fusion and compression again. Then at a certain moment, with a soft bang sound, the energy particles that were merging there exploded instantly, forcing the energy around them far away, forming a circle of undetectable energy. Ripple. In this regard, Yuan Meng just regarded it as normal, selected another energy particle, and continued the experiment again. The prehistoric years did not keep track of time. Yuan Meng devoted himself to experiments, and decades passed quickly. Haha. Success. On this day, a sound of laughter suddenly came from Buzhu Peak, containing endless emotion and joy. Looking at that particle with one's mind, it is 10 times smaller than the energy particles in the past. However, it contains 10 times more energy than the energy particles in the past, and contains a trace of spiritual brilliance. The corners of Yuan Meng's mouth grinned wider and wider, and finally he laughed wildly. Well, it seems that you have your own spirituality. From now on, you will be called spiritual energy particles. From now on, the energy in the prehistoric world will be called spiritual energy. And since the current spiritual energy was first formed and belongs to the first generation, it is the first level spiritual energy. Look at that stable energy particle. Well, it should be called spiritual particles now. No matter how Yuan Meng looked at it, he was satisfied. Although it was only the first level of spiritual energy, the energy contained in it was already 100 times that of ordinary energy particles in the same volume. And if all the energy of the entire prehistoric world is converted into spiritual energy, the prehistoric world will definitely undergo another transformation. Even if it is still not as strong as the energy intensity in the real world, the gap will definitely be greatly reduced. Now that the spiritual energy particles have been created and condensed, the next step is to conquer the entire prehistoric world. Yuan Meng was even a little impatient for this. Naturally, the subsequent transformation of spiritual energy does not require Yuan Meng to carry out the transformation step by step. He only needs to engrave the transformation method of spiritual energy into the origin of the world and become a rule and avenue of the world. Next, the world itself will naturally undergo simultaneous transformation. Thinking of this, Yuan Meng didn't hesitate, and with the thought, he engraved the method of transforming spiritual energy into the origin of the world. Bashu 69 New. This caused a new rule to appear in the ancient world that originally only had the rules of time and space, which can be called the aura rule. With the birth of the spiritual energy rules, the prehistoric world began to change from its roots, gradually affecting the entire three prehistoric realms. Whether it is the earth, mountains, rivers, or the sun, moon, and stars, there is a trace of spiritual energy being born. No, even the earth, mountains, rivers, sun, moon, and stars themselves began to transform into the structure of spiritual energy, becoming existences composed of countless spiritual energy particles. It's just that because of the different material properties, the composition of the spiritual energy particles is also different. And as the energy of the prehistoric world began to transform into spiritual energy, the power of chaos from the outside began to pour into the prehistoric world crazily, filling the energy vacancy of the prehistoric world. After all, that was a 100-fold gap. However, these powers of chaos are not directly integrated into the prehistoric world. Instead, the moment they enter the prehistoric world, they have been transformed into earth, water, fire, wind, sun, moon, stars, etc. by the power of the rules of spiritual energy in the prehistoric world. Auras with different properties. As the energy of the prehistoric world was completely transformed into spiritual energy, the entire prehistoric world became much thicker and more solid in an instant. Moreover, the space-time structure of the entire prehistoric world is also undergoing subtle changes, becoming more reasonable, more complete, and stable, and the prehistoric world has finally been promoted again. As the prehistoric world advanced, the prehistoric world began to expand crazily again. Every moment was a distance of hundreds of millions of light years. As for the Buzhu Mountain, with the expansion of the prehistoric world, it began to rise continuously, becoming more majestic and indestructible, standing between heaven and earth, supporting the sky, suppressing the three realms of the prehistoric world, the universe of heaven and earth. The sun, moon, and stars above the void are also increasing rapidly, and are still rapidly moving away from the ancient continent, so that when viewed from the ancient continent, they have always maintained their original size. As the promotion of the prehistoric world was completed, driven by the prehistoric world, the chaotic space also began to advance. When the chaos space was promoted this time, Yuan Meng completely connected and fused the chaos Yuan power in his body with the chaos power in the chaos space, which was already at the same level as the chaos Yuan power. Together, this caused the chaotic energy in Yuan Meng's body to begin to evolve together with the power of chaos. There are advantages and disadvantages to this. The disadvantage of this is that in the future, Yuan Meng will no longer be able to cultivate his own strength alone, and can only advance with the evolution of the world. Moreover, the energy concentration in the body will be the same as that of the entire chaotic world. And if you want to increase the energy concentration of immeasurable chaos, you can imagine the difficulty. However, the world itself is Yuan Meng's core and most fundamental power. After the two are connected and integrated, it doesn't matter if he can't practice alone. As for the energy concentration, the entire chaotic power of immeasurable chaos is not at his disposal. Moreover, there is another advantage to doing this, that is, from now on, Yuan Meng no longer needs to specialize in cultivating the power in his body. As long as he continues to improve the evolutionary world, he can naturally continue to increase his own power. As long as the world evolves, Yuan Meng will naturally advance accordingly. In this way, Yuan Meng can naturally free up a lot of time to understand various rules of the Great Road and constantly complete the prehistoric world. In short, after the chaotic energy in the body is connected with the power of infinite chaos, the advantages outweigh the disadvantages. Thanks to book friend Long Shenjiao Nei for the 100 reward. 400 reward for eye of predicting the future. Xiaobai S100 reward. The journey of creation from fantasy to reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 29. This time, the energy in the chaotic space evolved, but it did not form aura particles like the prehistoric world, but still maintained its original form. However, in terms of the essential quality, there was a drastic change, and the energy level became more advanced. Well, because of Yuan Meng's original setting, the energy level of the upper space must always be one level higher than the energy level of the lower space. So now, although the energy in the chaotic space has not changed in form, the essential level of energy is one level higher than the aura of the prehistoric world. In order to facilitate statistics and synchronize with the prehistoric world, Yuan Meng called the chaotic energy in the chaotic space now the first level chaotic energy. That is, the first level chaotic ancestral qi, the first level chaotic ancestral qi, and the first level chaotic qi. After the world was upgraded this time, the energy in Yuan Meng's world has been greatly improved in quality, but it is indeed much less in quantity. Not to mention the infinite space-time dimensions in the chaotic space, the energy in it is not too much because of the repeated promotion of the world and the high energy level. Even the current chaotic space has reduced its energy by hundreds of times after this promotion, and because the chaotic ancestral qi is already at the same quality level as the chaotic energy in his body. In a short period of time, it is impossible for Yuan Meng to fill the entire chaotic space with chaotic ancestral qi as before, which requires him to accumulate a lot of time. On the contrary, the chaotic ancestral qi, because it is not as good as the chaotic ancestral qi in quality, can still be converted from the chaotic ancestral qi in large quantities. Although it is also much scarcer, it still fills the entire chaotic space and does not affect the evolution of other worlds. After sorting out the power in his body, Yuan Meng no longer thought about other things, but returned to his body in the real world with a slight movement of his mind. Although he has lived in the prehistoric world for decades, Yuan Meng's mentality is not at all old and aging. It is still the mentality that people of this age should have in the real world. This is certainly not because Yuan Meng has polished his mind to the state of being psychic, not moved by external things, eternal, and immortal at this stage. It is because the time he spent in the prehistoric world and the influence on his mind all fell on Tianzun. In the prehistoric world, Tianzun represents Yuan Meng's past. The time he has experienced is all gathered and integrated into Tianzun, constantly adding to and increasing Tianzun's power. As the saying goes, the past is eternal and immortal, the present is permanent and supreme, the future is infinite and endless. Tianzun represents Yuan Meng's past, the human emperor is Yuan Meng's present, and the Hades emperor is Yuan Meng's future. Well, this is all in the mind and in the prehistoric world. If Yuan Meng can reach the state in reality, then his prehistoric world will be a real prehistoric world. After returning to the real world, Yuan Meng looked inward and found that the chaotic energy in his body had indeed undergone a qualitative change as he expected, and it had increased tenfold. Of course, the amount of chaotic energy was also the same as the chaotic ancestral energy in the chaotic space, and it was reduced by 100 times in the same proportion. Yuan Meng didn't care much about this. After all, not to mention that his current foundation was in the chaotic primitive world, it didn't matter if the chaotic energy in his body was reduced by 10 times. After all, although the quality of the chaotic energy was improved, Yuan Meng's body was so big that it was not as difficult to replenish it as the chaotic space, so it could be easily replenished. What's more, there was the chaotic space. The total volume of the chaotic power of the chaotic space was much greater than the total amount of energy in his body. Moreover, not only that, as Yuan Meng thought, when the quality of the chaotic energy in his body was improved. As the chaos qi circulated in his body, it began to rapidly improve his physical fitness, including other powers in his body, the star qi, the 5 elements qi, and the qi and blood. Even the speed at which he analyzed the energy rules was slightly faster. Overall, Yuan Meng's current strength has been greatly improved again. In the next few days, Yuan Meng resumed his usual routine, reading books and analyzing the rules of heaven and earth. Or when he was resting, he entered the prehistoric world and conducted some spiritual energy experiments to see if he could compress and condense it again, further improve the energy quality, and improve the level of the prehistoric world. Of course, Yuan Meng was not in a hurry about this. Not to mention the power in his body, the quality had not yet been completely transformed and improved. This time, Yuan Meng estimated that after his body was strengthened by the chaos qi, his lifespan would be greatly increased. Not to mention the increase of 10 times to more than 1,000 years, but at least it could guarantee that he would live to 500 years old without illness or disaster. After such a long time, Yuan Meng no longer believed that he still couldn't figure out a way to improve the quality of spiritual energy again. With more time, Yuan Meng's mood naturally relaxed a little, and his mind became active. Should he go out for a walk? Or invite a few friends to get together? Facing the direction of the lotus pond, facing the warm sun, Yuan Meng lay on the recliner, swinging his legs leisurely, holding a copy of Huangting Jing in his left hand and reading it carefully. Thinking about whether he should differentiate all the gods in the prehistoric world, it must be very interesting. But in the end, Yuan Meng still shook his head and gave up this idea. Even if he differentiated all the gods, he would still be the only one. It would be enough to differentiate Tianzan, Mingdi, and Renhuang. As for the others, he would wait for the prehistoric world to evolve slowly. Anyway, he was not in a hurry. In his right hand, he held a ball of water, which kept changing its shape with Yuan Meng's gestures, water knife, water sword, or transformed into various animals. He was thinking about what to do next. Should he go to the city to meet his friends, or call them here directly? Well, it would be nice to go out for a trip and feel the beautiful mountains and rivers of this world. After he crossed over, he had not really experienced this world. He was trying his best to make money before, and then he came to this place to retire because he was terminally ill. Well, it's okay to say he's waiting to die. But now that his body has recovered and he has let go of material possessions like money, he naturally wants to walk around freely as he pleases. Yuan Meng suddenly looked towards the door in surprise, and waved his right hand naturally. The water ball that changed shape in his hand turned into a water belt and quickly sank into the flowers next to it. Ding dong! Ding dong! Just after Yuan Meng finished all this, the crisp doorbell sounded. The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 30. Silently, the door slowly opened. Well, this is certainly not caused by Yuan Meng's magical power. With his current strength, he cannot do it to this extent. Well, with the technology of this day and age, installing an automatic door is really not a big deal. A group of men and women quickly entered the villa, led by a young man in his 20s, and walked towards where Yuan Meng was. Before he even got close, the young man in his 20s couldn't wait to start shouting loudly. "Uncle Yuan, I'm here to see you. Uncle Yuan, are you feeling better now?" Seeing Yuan Meng lying leisurely on the recliner, the young man did not feel dissatisfied at all. Instead, he quickly stepped forward and asked with concern. He still knew something about Yuan Meng's situation. The cancer was in the advanced stage, but he didn't want to be hospitalized or undergo chemotherapy. Now he probably just relied on drugs to survive. "Isn't your kid in college? Why do you have time to visit your Uncle Yuan now? Moreover, look at the way your Uncle Yuan looks now, does it look like there is something wrong?" Seeing the young man approaching, Yuan Meng stood up from the recliner with a strong effort, stretched out his hand and slapped the young man on the head. The young man's name is Xuanhuan, and he is the son of a very good friend of his. He is also very close to Yuan Meng and often stuck to him when he was a child. Only in recent years, after Xuanhuan went to school out of town, there have been less visits, but during holidays, he will definitely come here to see him. Hey, my Uncle Yuan, you should be more careful. Seeing Yuan Meng getting up so quickly, Yu Zhichuan's face turned pale. You really don't care about your body at all. What should you do if something goes wrong? What are you being careful about? I've told you a long time ago that my body has been recuperated a long time ago. You still don't believe it? My body now is much better than your little brat. Yuan Meng laughed and cursed, punched Yu Zhichuan on the chest, knocked him back a step, and stretched out his hands to rub it. Regarding his physical condition, Yuan Meng had already told his close friends so as not to worry them. Of course, he only said that his body had been improved by his own care, and did not tell the real situation. After all, he still understood the principle that ordinary people are not guilty and harboring a treasure is a crime. It's not that I don't believe everyone, it's just that there are too many surprises in this world. A secret is only called a secret when one person knows it. When the second person knows it, it is no longer a secret. There are too many possibilities for it to be leaked by being drunk, talking in sleep, etc. What's more, after everyone learned about Yuan Meng's situation, while they were envious, didn't they also desire that they also have the same power? But even Yuan Meng himself is not sure whether his power can be controlled by others. If everyone cannot obtain the same power after being taught by Yuan Meng, will they treat Yuan Meng with a normal heart? Will he think that he does not have the qualifications to practice, or will he think that Yuan Meng does not teach sincerely? People's hearts are complicated, and sometimes they really can't stand the test. As for Yuan Meng, he didn't mean to test people's hearts. He felt that this was good. Unless one day, he has complete confidence that others can practice like him, or that he can dominate the world. Otherwise, Yuan Meng would not let others know his differences. He would not be worried about being few, but worried about inequality. Before he has enough strength to protect himself, Yuan Meng believes that his end will definitely not be good if others know about his specialness. Ahem, I believe it, I believe it. With your current strength, you will definitely live a long life. While rubbing it, Yu Zhichuan coughed twice and complimented with a wry smile. Maybe it was because Uncle Yuan had an optimistic attitude and good health. From the outside, this body really didn't look like someone with terminal cancer. It's just that Yuan Meng's body is completely healed, but Yu Zhichuan doesn't believe it. And it's not just him, including his parents, who don't believe that Yuan Meng's body is healed. Longevity. Yuan Meng had a weird look on his face. Are you trying to curse me? With Yuan Meng's current physical condition, he even doubted that he could continue to live like this until he had enough. Who are these? However, Yuan Meng had no intention of explaining. After punching Yu Zhichuan, he glanced at the few people who came with him and asked with a smile. Oh, look, I forgot to introduce you to you. Yu Zhichuan slapped his forehead with a look of surprise on his face. Uncle Yuan. This is what I mentioned to you before, my good brother Zhao Li. Yu Zhichuan pointed at another boy besides him and said to Yuan Meng. Uncle Yuan, hello. My name is Zhao Li. Zhao Li quickly walked up to Yuan Meng, shook hands with Yuan Meng, and said hello to him. Well, Zhao Li, hello. This is Tang Yuping, Zhao Li's girlfriend. This is a beautiful girl wearing a cool vest and short shorts, exposing her belly button, long legs, short ear-length hair, tall and slim figure, and quite a bit of a heroic temperament. Uncle Yuan, hello. My name is Tang Yuping, Zhao Li's girlfriend. When Yu Zhichuan introduced him, he came to Yuan Meng openly and introduced himself again with a smile. Hello, Miss Tang. Yuan Meng looked her up and down and shook her hand gently. It seems that this girl has an extraordinary background. Ordinary families cannot raise such a girl. This girl is most likely from a military family. This is an Yan Ran, is it? I know this. Isn't this the girl you often mentioned that you must pursue? It seems that you have pursued her. Not bad. Not bad. I really don't know what kind of dog shit luck you have. Such a beautiful girl who looks very gentle and virtuous at first glance was actually pursued by you. Carefully looking at the girl in a plain long skirt in front of him, her face is dignified and delicate, her long hair dancing in the wind, standing quietly beside Yu Jukan, she is the kind of good girl, even from a scholarly family. Facing Yuan Meng's jokes, Yu Jukan blushed slightly, a little hot, but he could only smile helplessly and secretly glanced at Yan Ran. Hello, Uncle Yuan. I'm Jukan's girlfriend. Yan Ran's face was slightly flushed, but she was still quiet. She just glanced at Yu Jukan and greeted Yuan Meng generously. Well, hello, Yan Ran, when you come to Uncle Yuan, just treat it as your own home. If you need anything, just go to Jukan. Yuan Meng smiled and nodded, then looked at the last girl. This is Yan Ran's best friend, Xiaoyue, who came here with us this time. Seeing Yuan Meng's gaze, Yu Jukan hurriedly introduced again. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 31. Hello, Uncle Yuan. Xiaoyue, who was wearing a knee-length pink dress with a petite and graceful figure and a pretty face, immediately said hello to Yuan Meng crisply after Yu Zhihan introduced herself, and at the same time looked at Yuan Meng with curiosity. Hello, Miss Xia. After shaking hands with Xiaoyue, Yuan Meng turned his attention to Yu Zhihan again. You haven't told me yet why you didn't go to college and instead came to your Uncle Yuan. Could it be that you skipped classes? After greeting everyone, Yuan Meng asked the previous questions again and looked at Yu Zhihan with suspicion. Turning class? How dare I? If my dad finds out about this, he will have to break my legs. After listening to Yuan Meng's inquiry, Yu Zhihan quickly explained. It's not our school yet, it's said to be closed for reconstruction, so it's a holiday. Only. Just what? Seeing Yu Zhihan's hesitant look, Yuan Meng couldn't help but curiously asked, this child had never been like this in front of him before. There are just rumors in our school that our old laboratory building is haunted, and several people have died, which has attracted the attention of the country. Not only did the police block the place, but some people wearing strange clothes also entered. Judging from their behavior and the attitude of the police towards them, it seemed that their status was not low. Although the explanation given by the school later was that someone committed suicide, we didn't really believe it. How can this be such a coincidence? As soon as something happened over there, the school was closed and major reforms were carried out here. Judging from the suspicious look on Yu Zhihan's face, it was obvious that he did not believe the statement given by the school. And not only him, but also his friend Zhao Li also looked suspicious. The three girls, on the other hand, had expressions of disdain on their faces. They obviously didn't believe it. Firstly, they were not from Yu Zhihan's school, so they didn't know the details about it. Secondly, it was the current overall environment. Originally, since the founding of China, there were often legends of ghosts and monsters in the beginning, but in the end it was proved that they were all rumors or unsolved scientific mysteries, and there were no real ghosts. Nowadays, it is difficult for these materialistic young people under 9-year compulsory education to believe this unless they see it with their own eyes. They just think it is another rumor or an unsolved mystery created by special circumstances. In short, there must always be a scientific reason for this, but it has not been cracked by people. Even Yu Zhihan and Zhao Li probably didn't think it was really a ghost. They just thought it was not a suicide or even an ordinary murder. There should be other secrets. After listening to Yu Zhihan's words, he remembered the white ghost he had seen before, and Yuan Meng looked thoughtful. It seems something extraordinary must have indeed happened in this world. In the past few decades, he had never really heard or seen any supernatural events in this world. Now, within a short period of time, 2 incidents have occurred, and even one of them was something Yuan Meng had seen and experienced with his own eyes. As for what happened at Yu Zhizhen's school, which actually caused the school and the country to get into such a big fight, Yuan Meng believed that it was definitely not an ordinary murder incident. Yes, Uncle Yuan, you also think the school's explanation is unreliable. Someone must have really killed someone there, and the method must have been very cruel and vicious. Either someone is conducting evil human experiments there, or there are really evil spirits killing people, but my dad always doesn't believe it. Seeing Yuan Meng's expression, Yu Zhizhen seemed to have found someone who recognized him, and said anxiously. Several other people also looked at Yuan Meng to see what he thought about Yu Zhizhen's school. I discovered that every university seems to have old buildings, old laboratory buildings, old dormitories, and even old classrooms, and there are also supernatural legends in these old buildings. Otherwise, why are there so many haunting incidents in old buildings? Yuan Meng nodded and said with a thoughtful expression. Ah, that's it? Yu Zhizhen stared at Yuan Meng blankly, without reacting for a long time. The look on your face as if you were aware of something, just as if every university has old buildings, and are there supernatural events in the old buildings? He. Looking at the conversation between the uncle and nephew, Zhao Li couldn't help but laugh out loud. Even the other 3 girls all had reserved smiles on their faces. This uncle was quite humorous. However, no matter what, for this kind of thing, it is better to believe that it exists than to believe that it does not exist. If it is not necessary, it is better to have less contact with such things and go to such places less often. After making a joke, Yuan Meng said in a serious tone. Most of today's young people don't pay much attention to supernatural events. Even if they have doubts, they are mostly doubtful and will not really take this kind of thing to heart. However, Yuan Meng still reminded him. Of course, Yuan Meng only gave a brief reminder, but there was no deeper persuasion. After all, without personal experience of this matter, it was really unconvincing. Talking too much will lead to their rebellious psychology, and they may even deliberately go to places where supernatural occurrences occur, which would be a bit bad. If they really encountered a real supernatural event, wouldn't it be harming them? After talking for a while, Yuan Meng led Yu Zhichen and the others to the living room of the villa. Uncle Yuan, I feel that your villa is getting more and more fresh and comfortable. I think the air here is much fresher and more natural than those deep mountains and old forests. Every time I come here, I feel physically and mentally comfortable, as if a heavy burden has been removed. Yu Zhichen said to Yuan Meng while walking. Yeah. Even the others nodded in agreement. They also had this feeling. They felt that the air here was even much stronger than other so-called famous mountains and rivers. Hey, that's natural. Otherwise, why would I spend half of my fortune to buy this villa? It's because the natural environment here is suitable for people like me to cultivate their character. Yuan Meng glanced at Yu Zhichen and said with a little pride that the villa here can't be bought just by having money, it also requires a certain network of people. Boy, are you going to stay here for one night or go directly to the mountain? After arriving at the living room, everyone sat down as host and guest. After Yu Zhichen rushed to pour tea for everyone, Yuan Meng looked at Yu Zhichen and asked calmly. The one who knows me is Uncle Yuan. We have prepared everything for the mountain and put it in the car outside. Just get some food from Uncle Yuan. Of course, the most important thing is, how can I not come to see my dear Uncle Yuan when I am here? Naturally, I have to come to see Uncle Yuan first, and then go into the mountain. Yu Zhichen walked around behind Yuan Meng, pinched his shoulders with both hands, and said flatteringly. The Journey of Creation from Fantasy to Reality. Author, Get a Spark. Chapter 32. Humph. I know that when you come here, you must have to go up the mountain first. It's not impossible, but... Yuan Meng narrowed his eyes slightly and enjoyed Yu Zhizhen's service. After a while, he snorted twice and said slowly. But what? You said. But you must return to the villa before dark, and you are not allowed to spend the night in the mountains. Yuan Meng said solemnly, it wasn't that there were any large beasts in the mountains, or that he was too cautious. In fact, based on his previous experiences and what Yu Zhizhen said, a bad thought came to his mind. At night, it is better to stay outdoors as little as possible. Why? Yu Zhizhen looked at Yuan Meng in surprise. He knew that his uncle, Yuan Meng, would never act without aim. It's just that this is not the first time he has come to Qingping Mountain. He has even spent the night in the mountain several times, and his uncle Yuan has never stopped him. Yuan Meng also felt that although Yu Zhizhen was young, he still needed to develop his independence. Therefore, Yuan Meng actually had a supportive attitude towards Yu Zhizhen spending the night in the mountains. After all, there are no poisonous insects and beasts in this mountain, otherwise it would be impossible to build these villas. The people who live here are all famous people in the nearby city. If anything goes wrong, it is not a small matter, it will be dealt with and it caused an uproar in society. That's why Yu Zhizhen was so surprised and confused when Yuan Meng stopped him from spending the night in the mountains this time. You don't have to worry about that much. You just need to know that you have to return before dark. Do you agree or not? If not, hey. Yuan Meng did not explain. After all, he did not know what to say. Could it be that he told Yu Zhizhen and the others that he was worried about something strange happening in the mountains, so he forbade them to spend the night in the mountains? So he had to force his request. After all, Yuan Meng also experienced a strange incident. If Yu Zhizhen and the others spent the night in the mountains and something bad happened, it would be too late to regret everything. Okay, I support Uncle Yuan. Looking at Yuan Meng's serious expression, Yu Zhizhen hesitated slightly, and finally nodded in agreement, but his expression was gloomy and slightly unhappy. The others were also a little disappointed, but they didn't say anything. This made Yuan Meng secretly nod. Fortunately, there are no thorny people among these people. He hates the kind of people who don't know the truth and don't listen to others' advice. As for the loss of expression, this is normal. After all, he is a young man. He is not afraid of anything, full of curiosity, and loves adventure. Being blocked by an adult from one of his adventures, well, this may not be considered a big deal. Adventure. However, no matter which child it is somewhat unpleasant to be blocked by an adult from an inevitable action, especially in front of people close to them. Therefore, Yuan Meng just smiled and didn't take it seriously at Yu Zhizhen's little expression. After everyone talked and laughed for a while, Yu Zhizhen led everyone and said goodbye to Yuan Meng. Okay. Be careful all the way. Yuan Meng followed all the way and sent these children out of the villa. I got it, Uncle Yuan, go back. You still have to pay more attention to your health. Let me tell you, you should hire a nanny or something to take care of you. Okay, where did all this nonsense come from? Get out of here quickly. Seeing Yu Zhizhen's verbose look, Yuan Meng waved his hand impatiently, signaling for him to get out of here. Huh? Humph. However, at this moment, Yuan Meng, who had just walked out of the villa and arrived in front of Yu Zhizhen's car, suddenly paused, and then he groaned involuntarily and staggered. Uncle Yuan. What's wrong with you? Uncle Yuan. Uncle Yuan. Yu Zhizhen and others, who were startled by this sudden scene, couldn't help but gathered around and asked about Yuan Meng's situation. It's okay, I just seem to be a little distracted. As he spoke, Yuan Meng covered his chest and stepped back slightly, before regaining his previous calm expression. It's okay, it's okay, it's okay, Uncle Yuan, why don't we go to the hospital first? Seeing that Yuan Meng really didn't look like anything was wrong, Yu Zhichen patted his chest and felt relieved. Okay, okay, I said it's okay, you should leave quickly. Yuan Meng waved his hand again, indicating that he really had nothing to do and everyone could set off into the mountain. Okay, let's go then, Uncle Yuan, goodbye. After confirming again that Yuan Meng was okay, Yu Zhichen and his party got into the car one after another, started the car, and headed towards Qingping Mountain. From Yuan Meng's villa to Qingping Mountain, we can still drive about 3 to 5 miles, but it was not accessible to traffic just now, so we had to walk into the mountain. Uncle Yuan, goodbye. Times 5. Goodbye. Goodbye. Looking at the cars going away, Yuan Meng waved his hand and turned back to the villa. He wanted to see what happened just now. When he came to the pool where he had rested, he waved his sleeve slightly to sweep away the dust on the ground, then sat cross-legged, closed his eyes, and kept his mind introverted. He looked inwards and examined the situation inside his body inch by inch. However, no matter how many times Yuan Meng checked or how carefully he checked, he could not find anything wrong at all. After a long time, Yuan Meng slowly stood up, frowning and pacing back and forth, slowly thinking about what was going on and what happened before. Nothing happened until he said goodbye to Yu Zhichen and the others, and when he walked out of the villa and walked to the front of the car, his strength suddenly disappeared completely. No, it seems that this cannot be said. Yuan Meng carefully thought about the situation at that time. His strength should not have disappeared, but was suppressed to an extreme. Even with his own mental power, he could only vaguely sense it, but could not mobilize it at all. This caused him to stagger when he suddenly lost his strength. As for whether it was true or not, wouldn't he know if he just tried it? Yuan Meng raised his head suddenly, showing a thoughtful look, and strode out of the villa. Along the way, Yuan Meng carefully felt the strength in his body. When he arrived outside the gate of the villa, he did not feel the strength in his body, and there was no difference at all. When he came to the place where he lost his strength before, Yuan Meng's speed suddenly slowed down and he moved forward cautiously. Well, no matter what, we still need to be careful. Little by little, finally. After walking a certain distance, Yuan Meng felt that his great power disappeared completely in an instant without any sound. Although he was prepared, the discomfort still made Yuan Meng groan and his body swayed slightly. Sure enough. Yuan Meng showed a look of understanding. It should be that after leaving the villa within a certain range, his own power will be suppressed.